Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this Mr. Pandaria raiding guide, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the 10-man normal mode of Feng The Accursed in the Mogoshan Vaults. In order to complete this fight, we use 2 tanks, 3 healers, and a mixture of both ranged and melee DPS. Now this encounter does require a massive amount of healing, so it's advisable that you do take your classes that are able to do decent amounts of AoE healing. First things first, we're going to have a quick look at the abilities that this boss has, and then we're going to move on to speak about how you actually defeat this encounter. This is a 3-phase encounter, and first of all we're going to take a look at some of the abilities that the tanks need to focus on, because these are a key part to the encounter, and also one of the general abilities that the boss has. Now the first general ability is called Spirit Bolt, and this is just where the boss basically fires 96,000 shadow damage to 3 random players, and this will occur throughout the whole encounter. Now the 2 main things the tank needs to look out for, well the tank since you have 2 of them during this encounter, is the Nullification Barrier and the Shroud Reversal, and these are 2 abilities that will be, it sounds weird, on the floor at the start of the encounter that the tanks have to click on in order to pick up. Now the Shroud of Reversal will be on one tank, and that tank has to use it on a person in order to then steal one of the abilities that the boss has then cast on that person. And this is one of the most important abilities throughout the whole encounter, and it will help your healers out tremendously if you can get it right. The second ability is called Nullification Barrier, which your second tank will take, and this is basically a barrier that will be made around the tank. It's something that they have to channel, and this will nullify harmful effects such as the wildfires and also the epicenter that the boss casts. Phase 1 begins at 95%, and this phase goes by the name of Spirit of the Fist. And within this phase the boss has 3 abilities, and they go by the name of Lightning Lash, Lightning Fist and Epicenter. Now Lightning Lash is what your tanks need to look out for, and this is one of the reasons why we have 2 tanks, as this will inflict, it's a stacking debuff on the tank basically, and it inflicts 30,000 nature damage every 2 seconds for 20 seconds. The tank swapped about 3 stacks of this, 2 or 3 stacks, as that's also how we timed the nullification zone along with the epicenter. The Lightning Fist is a frontal ability that moves, so people need to actually look at the screen. I know it's hard, it's a World of Warcraft tactic that's not really well managed, but looking at your screen and seeing an ability coming towards you, and then you just move out of the way. And Epicenter is a massive AoE ability which can be interrupted if the tank steals Lightning Fist correctly, which we'll talk about later, and when the boss is casting Epicenter, it will reduce players' chance to hit him by 75% and also make your healers cry. The second phase of this encounter begins at 66% health on the boss, and this goes by the name of Spirit of the Spear. Now just like in the first phase, the boss has a debuff that he will apply on the tank, and this is called Flaming Spear, and this will inflict 30,000 fire damage every 2 seconds to the tank. The second ability he has is called Wildfire Spark, and this is a debuff that it will place on a random player throughout the fight. Now, we used a method of stacking up for this phase, so when you get the Wildfire Spark debuff on you, you need to run out, because after 5 seconds it will cause fire to spawn where that player is standing, and you don't want to be all grouped up and a fire spawning in the middle of you, especially if it's dealing 116,000 fire damage every second. And the third and final ability is where the boss draws in the wildfire. The ability is called Draw Flame, and all the wildfire that's on the floor will be absorbed into the boss, and every time he melee swings, he will inflict an additional 50,000 fire damage to everyone in the raid. Healer fun! And the third and final phase of this encounter goes by the name of Spirit of the Staff, and just like the other 2 phases, this has got 3 abilities, and the first one again is a stacking debuff on the tank which goes by the name of Arcane Shock, and it will inflict 30,000 arcane damage every 2 seconds for 20 seconds. The second ability is called Arcane Velocity, and this is a massive arcane storm. It looks like bits of arcane are just flying out of him everywhere and hitting people, and this will inflict damage to everyone in the raid, and it is a lot of damage, to be blunt, pretty much, and the further you are away from the boss, the more damage you're going to take. We'll talk about that later on. And the third and final ability is called Arcane Resonance, and this is an ability that is placed on one player, and it's a massive AoE ability, and it's a pulsing AoE ability, and if it hits other people, it will amplify the damage done to them by 10,000. So it does 10,000 to one target, and then if it hits someone else, it'll do 20,000, and then if it hits someone else, it'll do 30,000. So as you might have gathered, you need to be spread out for this phase. And now we've spoken about the abilities, we're going to move on to the tactic. Hooray! Killing stuff! So, this encounter. It's fun, but like I've already said, healers are not really going to have much fun. So at the start of the fight, we put a marker down where the whole raid's going to stack up. And then once the boss has hit 95% health, he'll move to the corner where you can see his little staff thing there highlighting, and phase 1 will begin. Now, you saw two shiny things on the floor. Those are the abilities that the tanks have to pick up. They get one each. And we're stacking up here because of the nullification barrier. And as soon as the boss begins to cast Epicenter, the tank that has the nullification barrier buff will run to the center of us and cast it. This is when the second tank will taunt the boss and keep him where he is, because the further we are away, if a tick of Epicenter gets through, it doesn't do as much damage. It's very, very healer manageable. Now, we did try not using the nullification barrier at all, and the healers cried. So yeah. The ability you just saw stun half of the raid, we're really good at moving as you may have noticed, is called Lightning Fists, and that is what your second tank needs to look to steal, because as you just saw there, the boss cast Epicenter, and then the tank used the Lightning Fist ability, which stunned him and stopped the cast of Epicenter. Healers are now happy because they have mana, and the raid isn't taking as much damage. Happy healers is a happy raid. And then by the time the third Epicenter is cast, the tank with the nullification barrier will have enough time, well, it'll be off cooldown basically, and then when Epicenter's got 5 seconds to be cast, because, you know, deadly boss mods, countdowns, all of that stuff, the tank runs into the raid, and then as soon as Epicenter's being cast, after 1 or 2 ticks, he'll cast the nullification zone, and again, happy healers. Everyone loves a happy healer. And this phase is pretty much your basic rinse and repeat up until 66%, where the boss will then enter phase 2. And now the boss has just hit 66% health. The second ability, well, the speary-like thing has spawned, and he'll move on into phase 2. Now again, for this phase, we're all going to stay stacked up, and the tank remains with the 2 buffs. They've got the nullification barrier, and also the ability to steal one of the boss's abilities. So again, we're stacking up, and the wildfire spark has just spawned on a player. Now they run out of the raid, and it explodes to the side, and you can see a patch of fire has now spawned. Just something I picked up on as well, it's preference to move to the sides with the wildfire sparks instead of behind, because when the boss absorbs them using the ability Draw Flame, if they go over the top of you, they still deal 100,000 damage, so I don't know if that's a bug or not, but you just need to move to the side. Now with the first Draw Flame, the tank uses the nullification barrier on top of the boss, and he doesn't get any stacks of that nasty ability which will deal 50,000 ticking damage to players. However, he will get the stacks for the second Draw Flame, and he will have 4 wildfires gained, so this is where your healers need to really be on the ball, be good at managing mana and mass AoE healing at the same time. So just as the encounter's going through, we're still getting the wildfire sparks, we're all still stacked up, and we know to move to the sides with the spark, let it explode there. So now the boss is casting the Draw Flame, we have no nullification zone, and he will gain, I think it's 14, no, he gained 23 stacks of the Draw Flame buff. Now this means that he will pulse every time he melee swings for 50,000 damage 23 times. It seems like a lot of damage, and there might be a better way of managing it, but this is one of the best ways that we found, because it means for the first and third draw flames we will have the nullification zone, and the third one is critical because this is when you want to be pushing your DPS in this phase, but don't use Bloodlust or Time Warp, because if you use it on the third draw flame, which is this one, just as you're entering the third phase, you don't want the boss to have any stacks of the draw flame ability because of the mass amount of AoE damage that's going to be going on. And the boss will enter phase 3 when he hits 33% health. So the boss has just hit 33% health and we're going into phase 3. Now as you can see on the buffs on the boss, he's still got 3 stacks of the draw flame on him. This isn't a problem because it's just 3 pulses. It's manageable. There's still some wildfire on the ground as well, just don't stand in the fire, it's basic common knowledge. So you can see over in the back there, one of the raiders has got arcane resonance on him, and there's a massive purple pulsating orb coming out of him. He just needs to stay away from the raid, otherwise he'll blow everyone up. Now when the boss is casting Arcane Velocity, everyone needs to stack up like they just did, and the tank has to use his Nullification Barrier. This will stop people taking any damage from it at all, from the Arcane Velocity. And the second tank that's able to steal boss abilities is able to steal these abilities, and he can cast them on the boss, however it's best to just keep both tanks near each other. Now phase 3 is a massive burn phase, and this is when we need to use Time Warp, especially at the second Arcane Velocity, because we have no nullification zone, and as you can see people are dying. One of our healers just died, and you need your healers basically. It's a very healer intensive fight. So you'll have your nullification zone for the first, third and fifth Arcane Velocities. If someone has the Arcane Resonance on them, they are not to move in unless there's a nullification barrier, because if there's a barrier there, people won't take the extra damage from it. But if there is no barrier there, then people are just going to blow up, and you're going to frown at the person that blew your raid up. And you're probably going to guild kick them as well for being a moron. But if Velocity is being cast and the person's standing out with the resonance on them, just spot heal them. You need to keep them up as much as possible. And that is it. That is Feng the Accursed. I think it's a brilliant fight personally. There's a lot going on, and it's just really fun. This tier will be fun for raiding. So as always, thank you for watching, and if you're interested in future Mr. Pandaria raiding guides, then please do feel free to subscribe to the channel.